Hello, and welcome to the Conscious Communion podcast, where we traverse through the inner dwellings of the human experience through conversation. I'm your host, Danae. Join me as we explore the interconnection of creativity and community. Vuyi Qubeka is a seer, artist, multidimensional storyteller, and a practitioner using indigenous knowledge and wisdom as her guide. Vuyi weaves together sound, ceremony, movement, visual art, and prose to conjure memory, activate healing, and inspire truth seekers, creatives, and pioneering leaders from all walks of life. Her work explores and extends both womb wisdom and the mother mind while confronting familial and collective traumas for shared restoration, redirection, and liberation. Qubeka offers one-on-one soul healing offerings, storytelling and speaking immersions, rites of passage ceremonies, teaching workshops, and explorative collaborations for a deeper exploration of our consciousness to heal the invisible. Welcome, Vuyi Qubeka. Hello.
Hello. Thank you. Always interesting to hear your Bible spoken back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I bet it is. These are the things. It's interesting, right? Because it's the things that you do and that you provide. But as someone like yourself who is a conduit, who is also very in tune with spirit, you know that it's spirit moving through you. So I'm sure it's a little bit odd to hear these things that you do, when I'm sure that sometimes it doesn't feel like you that's, doing these things because it's spirit moving through
you. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a very important distinction and an empowering one to release the labels so that you can continue to transform and blossom without holding too tight to anything. So spirit is in control.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We were talking about that earlier, about the attachments that we hold on to. And I think for our listeners that are hearing us now, I think that it's also important to kind of just fill folks in. This has been a process to get this recording out to the world. This is the second time that Vuyi and I have recorded. There was some technical issues that we experienced, and in the process of even recording today that we've experienced the same. And so we just we're allowing spirit to be the guide to clear the path for us. So thank you, spirit. I would love for you to just share a little bit about your origin story, how this got started for you coming into this work. And I believe that that's just such an important place to start, because you have taken yourself through the darkness and through many challenging aspects of your story to be where you are today. And I would love for you to just share a little bit about that.
That's a great question. I don't think we often think about our origin story. Probably part of us always playing small, but as you're asking me that, I'm thinking about the stories that a lot of like my parents or my elders would tell me about when I was still a child. And I'm now thinking about, what you said about surviving the darkness and just really learning to persevere in this world. And I think about a story my mom often tells me about when I was born, or as the first year of my life. And I struggled. I didn't actually walk, and I couldn't crawl either for the first year of my life. And it was a day before my first birthday that my dad and my mother took me to a traditional Hila Sangoma, which is a shaman. And she did a little ceremony on me and cut me in certain places along my meridian points, and used certain plant medicine. And I went home, and when I woke up the next day, I was walking and I was running on my first birthday. And I'm a twin, so my twin was far ahead of me in all of those things. So it was also in comparison to these two kids who came in at the same time. Obviously, there was something, unusual there. And I've never thought about it as being part of my origin story, but I think it already that kind of tells you something. There were other stories within that first year as well, where my mom would rush me to hospital because I was unresponsive, I wasn't breathing. And she remembers the one time running through a hospital. The hospital was empty and she couldn't find a doctor. And she, eventually found someone in an office and pleaded that they bring me back to life. And then when the doctor checked my pulse, I was fine. And I kind of, was my normal self again. And it was only much later, once I started kind of awakening and remembering who I am and reconnecting with, our first homes, cosmos, with God, the beloved, the divine, that I started to understand these bits of my origin story. And I often now joke with my mom and saying that I was there, but I wasn't, because I was still kind of in that first year, we're still acclimatizing to this realm. So she just caught me at a bad time when I was still kind of visiting. So yeah, that was the kind of introduction into this world. And I also feel like my first, clearly, I was also a bridge baby. So I think struggle and perseverance was already marked from the moment that I came in here. But I was born in South Africa, which was it was previously known as Azania, and we have quite an intense colonial history. And we kind of were born at the ends, towards the ends of apartheid and the segregation within the country. I was born in Soweto, which is quite an iconic township, just because of the liberation movement and a lot of the fighting that was done, began. The fires of that, the embers of that started in Soweto, which stands for Southwestern Township. And it was a township where a lot of black people, well, not a lot of black people were segregated to live in. That was the demarcated area for us. And whereas the rest towards the north was for white people. So that's the kind of frequency we were born into. And I remember, as toddlers, going to school, seeing tires burning, because of protests and things like that. So that's the kind of energy we were introduced into. And then later we moved into the suburbs. And that also was, this coming from this place where everybody around me looked like me, and we behaved a certain way towards each other. It was a family. Any person older than you was either your older sister or your mother, and a real community. And moving then to a place where you weren't really wanted. The walls were long, were tall. You didn't see children playing in the streets. It was a very different environment from Soweto in the suburbs, where things were quite, proper, and everyone kept to themselves and stayed in their home, their boxes. So I think that already as a child was my understanding that some of the work that I came to do was to be a bridge. So having had that kind of understanding, having had that introduction in Soweto, and then going into the suburbs, allowed me to kind of be able to relate to different parts of humanity, and to have different understandings about what different spaces offer us. So that's my origin story, I suppose. And then, we evolved. I grew up, we moved around a lot. And so there was there was some trauma in that. I think as a young person, moving from a place where this is the language we spoke, moving to a space where you don't really know the language, and I had to learn English. And then we moved again to a different part of the country where it was a wealthier neighborhood, but we weren't wealthy. So having this experience of being a child who's moving into teenagehood, and the things that come with that, and living in a space that you're too you're different from, really. Although, we would have liked to fit in and pretended that we were the people that we were like the people who were surrounding us. That was also quite something that affected my self-esteem quite a lot. And the behaviors are very different. It was very self-conscious. It was about the emphasis on material things, and that in itself was an instruction. And then later on, I thrived in the arts within school. I loved writing plays and acting in my own plays, and participating in the music festival. And I did quite well in that area and got awards and all kinds of things. Although I wasn't a strong academic um, pupil, and that's just because we know the school system is not designed for all kinds of souls and individuals. And I experienced my first trauma whilst I was in high school, kind of a bigger physical trauma that changed me, my personality, and I began to become more of a recluse and more of a mute, I guess, as well. And I started struggling to be myself or to know how to be in this world. I wasn't quite sure what the world wanted from me after that experience. After high school, following my passion wasn't really encouraged, it was drama. And so I tried to pursue something that would make my parents happy. That also kind of deserted me from myself even more. And I worked in jobs that I tried to enjoy, which, to some people might have looked like dream jobs. But during that process, I began getting sick because I was further and further away from who I really was, up until a point where I started being plagued by migraine headaches, which would be debilitating at times. I couldn't see, and it's just sensory overload, and I would be bedbound for days. And more I became, it was hard for me to function in the world. I could go to work and pretend, like a lot of us do. But then as soon as I got home, the exhaustion I felt from wearing the suit and the avatar just put me out. And I also became what we understood later to be understood later. I became depressed up until the point where I tried to transition and leave this world by taking my own life. And that was kind of the turning point of how I then reunited with who I really am and began on the journey of becoming and a reminder, a conjurer, a healer, storyteller, and all the other things I'm still discovering myself to be.
So it sounds like it's been a beautiful uncovering, an unearthing of sorts. Really just, and even the image of you going to a healer as an infant, as a baby, and running. I can see that very clearly. When you were sharing that story, I could see it. And it's so interesting how our childlike wonder, often that is the guide for us walking in our divine right. And coming back to that return, I'm sure, has been such a process and a reclamation of sorts for you. So what was that process like for you to reclaim those parts of yourself that have always been there, but that you had to, again, uncover, unearth, and really just sit with, alchemize, right?
So one key one that jumps out was, before I really got sick, but I was still kind of not walking my path. I went to go and OP in Holland for 1 year, and that was my kind of first intentional initiation of leaving, my country, leaving my home, leaving my family for the first time, and that was quite shifting for me. during that time, I began writing letters to friends and family, just telling them about my experiences, so it wasn't something I was overthinking. I was just telling them about my time there. And the feedback I was getting back was pretty positive. And that was when I discovered that I actually had a gift of writing. And I always say I had to believe to discover this gift. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have been able to tell these stories. So that was a big step in my uncovering, for one, that we are these infinite beings that have the power to manifest what our deepest desires or what we're shown, right? So during that time, I was taking images as well and writing, and I decided I wanted to go into travel writing. I didn't know how I was going to end up in travel writing because it's not one of those jobs that you see advertised. But this thrill of meeting new people and traveling and writing about it, it was just felt like such a gift that I wanted to work in that space. And, long story short, I manifested once I'd gone back to South Africa. Within about 3 years, I manifested this dream job, and I was a travel photojournalist. And that was a beautiful, beautiful time. And yeah, and I thoroughly experienced that, loved it, but my soul was aching still. It was still kind of screaming for me to reclaim my authentic voice and to realign with my true self. And I remember during that time, this is something it sounds so random, but it was huge for me at the time. But during the time when I was travel writing, I remember feeling like there's more of me. I want to be more of who I am. I don't know if it's an artist. We want to find labels to describe these things. But I remember the one time, because I've always been quite a quirky individual and creative and expressive, but I had this desire to wear 2 different earrings. One short one, and I'd liked to make my own things, own clothes and jewelry. And I decided to, the one day, I'm going to now do this thing that I've been wanting to do for so long, but I've been so afraid to do it. And that was to wear 2 earrings that were the 2 different sizes. One was short and one was long. But it was such a significant thing for me at the time. Things have really changed now. You can see it in advertising, but this was in 2014, 15, 16, that time. But there's certain things that weren't as common. When we looked at magazines, it was still kind of the same people, the same body shapes. So coming out and being myself and being quirky was a big deal. But I'm also mentioning the smaller things because that is also the marker of, transforming ourselves. It's a small thing. And I remember how great I felt after I'd done this bold thing, wearing 2 different earrings, and then it became my signature for a while. And then after that, you learn to dance with fear. You learn to increase the internal volume and decrease the external volume. That really half the time is our own made up stuff in our head. But that was part of it, of kind of coming back home. And then of course, being initiated in a traditional indigenous way, going away from, I'm a girl who was born and bred in Johannesburg, the city of gold, having not really been one with nature and had not known nature. I then go and I'm initiated in this traditional village where I'm living like my ancestors did, not wearing any shoes, sleeping on the floor, washing before the sun rises with cold water in winter, and just being connected with that raw primordial frequency that also was kind of shifting, but in a way that you can't really explain. And yeah, so those are some of the things that kind of brought me back to healing myself. But it's a process. It's a process, right? It's the first time you share a poem on Instagram after not believing in your own voice and your writing for a long time. I recently started a YouTube channel. Showing yourself to the world is a brave thing. So it's steps, and it depends on who we are, how it alchemizes us and transforms us. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I appreciate you saying it depends on who we are and how that alchemizes us, because when even thinking about an origin story, right? And thinking about who came before us and where was the suppression, especially in a female utilizing her voice to speak her truth. I think that there has been such a suppression for feminine bodies, for females, and for that expression to be accepted. And I believe that we're coming into a really unique time in our existence to see this reclamation happen for women all over the globe. And I know that this is your heart, that this is this is the work that you pour your heart and soul into, is the reclamation also of the womb and coming back into this deep remembrance of our origin as a species, and coming back into that. And so I would love for you to also share what that work has been like for you and how you've come to know this work on such a deep and intimate level.
I think the first and most obvious part of that answer was the fact that I was sick for so long with these headaches and just exhaustion, and spent so much money and time trying to find healing. Went to neurologists, had head scans, just anything to try and figure out what was happening in my head. And then to leave this one space and reality and these belief systems that I really thought, this is how I'm going to heal myself because this is what I was told. And then to leave with no pills, no medicine, no tools, and to leave and to go and live simply in a hut with a healer and reconnect with Mother Earth by being connected to her through my feet and not having these things that they've created, these rubbers and shoes that keep us disconnected from Mother Earth, and to be sleeping on the earth and to be ingesting plant medicine to cleanse my body, to purge, whether it's in the form of enemas and steaming with certain medicines, everything just connected to it's this Mother Earth's hand was extended to me. I felt her in all of these practices I had to observe, even just having to, like I mentioned, washing with cold water in the morning before the sun rises in winter, and understanding what winter is and what it means, what the sound of the earth sounds like during that time, what the water speaks like, what it has to tell us during that season. I think that was the beginning of my initiation into understanding the womb, because we are in, the amniotic fluid of Mother Earth. And here is me, who is flailing and just shriveling up from, living by thinking that I know what I'm doing and, not necessarily following Spirit's voice, then being in this space and surrendering to this invisible hand and bosom of Mother Earth. That was the first introduction, and then it was a continuation of. So the first part was my first healer was a man, and I had to understand something there as well. What feminine energy looks like when it's animated in a man, and what masculine energy feels like when it's moving through a man, and the importance and significance of that, those energetic placements within someone who would manifest in a man's body, right? And then the second journey was with another healer, Gogo, an elder who is, she could be my mother. She is so deep, and she introduced me to more like higher understandings, cosmic origins. She is traditionally trained, but she also, her ancestors sent her to the east, so she's healing me with Chinese medicine and teaching me some of those teachings. And she does what is it called? Physiotherapy and acupuncture. And she spent time with Native Americans, so I have that kind of first contact with, and then I'm now contacting my own ancestors, Native American ancestors and Indian ancestors. So she kind of expands me further after I've been grounded into the earth, and now I'm meeting, the family above. And then my third and final, well, not final, but my third chapter with like initiation, traditional initiation and structured formal initiation was with another elder, another Gogo woman. And she was severely in pain and traumatized me quite intensely. But I understood because of what she has also, has been through. What she's been through in this life, in other lives, but also the frequency in which we live. So we treat ourselves and we treat each other how we treated Mother Earth. And she treated me like she treats herself. It was a very hard lesson, but it was also my understanding, because we have certain not understanding, but we have a certain kind of how we perceive women. Well, I did for a long time. We tend to think that femininity or womanhood expresses itself like this. Women are soft, they gentle, whatever that might be, even if it's the opposite. But what I found through those experiences is that I had known women had been so disconnected to their primordial power, the power that I experienced when I saw Mother Earth during winter, and I see her rage, and we see the tsunamis, and we see the tornadoes, but we see spring as well, right? And we feel the breeze of the air. I started realizing that I had not been exposed to a woman that had that embodied within her. So, and when we do have that strength, that strength, right, in inverted commas, was this last teacher who was abusive, because the frequency wasn't in her strength, it was in her wound, it was in her trauma. And that, I think, began to show me how repressed energy, specifically for women, but for all of us, repress our energy within our diaphragm, within our subconscious intelligence, which is in our wombs, which is in our belly, that manifests outwards in how we speak, or how we don't speak, how we act, or how we treat others. And I then, once I had reconciled the initiation, and much of the initiation is focused on me transforming the wounds within my lineage, within my DNA, my ancestral DNA, my ancestors. So a lot of the focus is on my familial structures and patterns there. And then after a while, I was then able to come back to myself and say, okay, how do I heal me? How do I resolve having tried to commit suicide? How do I reclaim the power of my womb, having been violated as a teenager? And that's also a focus of my work, sexual violation. And having had these experiences with these three teachers, with Mother Earth being the mighty teacher, and then healing from my PTSD, and then finally going by communing with plant medicine, I was then able to begin to hear my own womb and to hear my ancestors, who a lot of them don't even look like me, aren't even from the same country as me. I was then shown what it means to heal the womb, how to heal the womb, and I say how, for lack of a better word, and how we can reclaim our true force, like the force of nature. When we think about the force of nature, which again is the tornado, the force of the tornado, but also the force of a bud peeping through the soil. So that's then how I began seeing what the womb wants to tell us, and how to allow the womb to speak. And then clarifying, cleansing the wounds in the womb, so that we can use our voices, so we can, discharge the blockages in our energy centers, and we can be fully breathing beings on all sides. I took the long route to that answer, but I think that's it.
No, and I think that that's beautiful, and I also think it's helpful to have heard. I loved your depiction of your, not your last teacher, but your most recent teacher that you sat with, who also gave you a lens and a perspective of the hardships of and the multifacets that a teacher and someone who can guide us to our own evolve can have, right? Sometimes those challenging moments with someone that we're learning from are almost the biggest portals, because it shows us those parts of ourselves as well, right? So because I think that that's such a potent medicine and a potent conversation, because I think it's something that a lot of us are seeing, especially in just the frequency of what's taking place around the globe. Can you share what those energies from another allowed you to see within yourself, and then how you danced to kind of move through that and alchemize that, and just use it as a resource to your own evolve and your own understanding? Because I think it's something that we're all seeing very much right now, right? There's so much divide. There's so many people that feel friction from another, but then they're not willing to actually go there. They're just willing to write that person off. But it sounds like for you, you really went through the experience of understanding them, trying to understand them, right? I'm sure there's a process of both, and then loving them and appreciating them. So can you share just what that process was like for you?
So interesting. Oh, for lack of a better word. The most profound part about that whole experience was that it ignited the artist in me. So I began to, we have Dagulbovu, which is red ochre mud that I have to apply on my body as part of the initiation process. As it's that kind of, that's the ancestors, right? Contact the ancestors and having them being with me. You have it in your hair. And so I started using pigment as a form of painting. And that was because there was such deep pain, right? Because you are in the space where you have gone to surrender yourself and to humble yourself for the purpose of healing, and then just experiencing this brutal treatment and force. And so there's this pain that I just had never encountered before. And to speak to that pain, or to ease that pain, I began to paint. And that's actually how I reunited with, I discovered that there was this quote unquote pain towel, So that was one of the first gifts that kind of unearthed, although I realized it much later, but unearthed as I was still in this place, which I was in for almost 8 months. You live there, you do everything there. The second one is the fact that I chose the experience, right? I signed up for that experience before I came into this reality. And oftentimes after that, when I have wanted to give up, and I think that energy comes up quite a lot, during these shifts for many of us. So it's okay if you feel like that from time to time. There are times when we just we can't accept that we can make it, or that life is as hard as it is, or it can get as hard as it does. And so in moments where things get difficult, I remember just how strong of a warrior I am, because the space that I was in, when I first arrived, there were twins there. I'm a twin myself, which I thought was quite significant. And it was a beautiful time, but it quickly changed. There was another person who came, the dynamics changed, and it became, I'd experienced bullying before as a child, but now I'm experiencing bullying in the space that I can't leave at night, that I'm always there. And it involves the person who's the head of the operation. And so, thinking about all these experiences I'm having here, another aspect is that I got to then confront and begin to heal the bullying that I had experienced early on in my life, and the bullying that I experienced from girls, right, from women. And so now I'm being confronted with this pattern that's been in womanhood for years, and I'm not the only one that can probably relate to this. But now I'm also being asked, what do we do about this thing? What do we do about the way that we treat each other, the way that we support or don't support each other, all those complexities around femininity or female relationships. And that meant then that I had to look at myself. Although there's this terror around me, it's completely about, why is this showing up now? And then it was then me having to cleanse the emotional densities within my life experience, and realizing that these things were showing things that have lived around me, even within my own family. So I think I then began to start understanding this is, so I don't know if, I think it was a global thing, but there was a time when there was a statement that said men are trash. There was that trend. I mean, there's a lot of gender-based violence in our country. It's just unimaginable the amount of gender-based violence there is in our country. But during that, shortly after I'd left, I started asking myself some questions based on my own experience, because now I'm like, okay, there is this thing that's happening in our country, but there's also this other thing that I experienced at the hands of a woman. But we don't really talk about the violence that is inflicted by women. And then I started thinking about the fact that these men that are hurting us and killing us are raised by our mothers and our grandmothers, because a lot of households in South Africa are led by women because of the history we have. A lot of men are not present in the home. And this was our grandfathers as well. They were forced to go and work in the mines to dig out gold, and were cut off from their family. So there's that pattern that we're having to resolve. And then this pattern then created sort of resentment within our grandmothers, our women, that was then being inflicted on young girls who become mothers at a young age, essentially. You have to run households and your mom is at work. You have to cook for your siblings. You have to clean. You have to. So that experience allowed me to step into the work that I do, where I'm working with the mother mind, the wisdom of the womb, and looking at our familial patterns, familial and collective patterns, which are actually very much shared. I don't think, I think that my experience is different from maybe someone in Scotland, even in America, or in Ghana somewhere. These are wounds that are permeating the human consciousness and the human experience. So, yeah, my experience there allowed me to see things for what they truly are, and not necessarily blaming people. So I didn't blame this healer, because she was so powerful. She taught me a lot. And her power, her beauty, her wisdom was so potent that I couldn't just let my experience of her be reduced to just the trauma she inflicted on me. And I think I also then began to appreciate and really begin to understand more deeply the complexities of this human experience. And that quote that says, the sinner, oh man, it's just completely run away from me. But the sinner has a past, or the sinner has a future, and the saint has a past. I think that's the it allowed me to have more compassion for myself, number one, because I had never really had that for myself, and a lot of us don't. And to also see that it actually, the problems and everything starts over here. And then the last part of that is that I encountered God and I encountered the Holy Spirit. I think I'd had encounters with the divine as a young teen before I'd had been, jaded by the world. But in this deep pain and bullying and the sadness that I was in, I just entered this quiet, peaceful place where the divine was. And I think that's the only reason why I was able to survive that entire journey. I didn't leave and run away because I felt like I had no choice. If I left, then I don't know what would happen to me. I didn't really have the structural support and understanding for my family, and I felt like this is the last resort I had. So I stayed on. But the grace of the beloved and the divine was what sustained me. And that's, I think, what we're now ushering or reconciling with or reuniting with is that frequency of the divine, frequency of home where we've come from. The solar flares and the rising in consciousness is taking us back to the beloved. And I see now that was me being prepared for this time that we're all kind of, deconstructing and rebuilding together.
Yeah, 1,000%. It's interesting. I feel such a sense of relevance in that story, and having experienced something that felt similar to me in my own journey, and knowing that almost the same thing became very apparent for me in my sitting with this process for myself, was exactly what you said with mothers, grandmothers, and having this maternal matriarchal structure that was almost put on them. And that almost goes back to, sorry, it's like, this is making so much sense, but it goes to the expression of voice and potentially not having the clarity or the ability to use their voice in a way that felt empowering because they were in the home. And that became so clear to me in my work, and having to just come to terms with that just being a part of what we get to reclaim. And that is the work that you're doing. And I just want to say bravo for allowing the spirit and for the divine, the beloved, to move through you in this way, to have that grace and that compassion, because not all of us are taught that. But if we're open to receiving it from the beloved, then we can in turn then be that for others. So I honor spirit and how spirit moves through you. That's a really beautiful reclamation. So thank you for reclaiming that for yourself and for your lineage, and for being a model for folks, because I know that you are also doing that for the folks that you work with, the individuals that you get to take through their own process, because that is now a story that's interweaved into the threads of how you communicate with others. So that's really beautiful. And yeah, I know that you hold the intention of activating the silent knowing within others to bring them back to their primordial essence. And I know that so much of it is the interweaving of all of these things, but what does it generally look like for you to do that with an individual that you're working with one-on-one? What does that process look like? I know you've done it for yourself, but what does it look like as a guide and as a facilitator?
So I use the wisdom of numerology and sound as kind of preparation, days leading up to the session. There's a system I use where the client would pick a number, and that number reveals already messages to us about where they are in their life, what they need to work with. And then depending on what number they choose for those days leading up to the session, there's some things that they have to do, and this is communing with their own stuff, with the silence, with their emotions, being more mindful of their dreams, working with water, or if I'm shown the element that's relevant to them at the time, and to just because a lot of people don't actually even make time to pray or just a moment for themselves. So to carve that out, leading up to that, so that they can encounter whatever they need to encounter, that is what has actually called them to allow that energy to continue to work without my interfering. Initially, I work with them in spirit, so I work and walk with them in spirit, and usually by the time that we then have the session, I've understood some of the things that I need to help them unblock, or to just hold up as a mirror for them. And and then as we come in, then we'll work with the breath. We'll do some breath work, and with the support of sound, because sound moves energy. And I'll do a little sound journey with them in the beginning. And then we bring in, because I call it the Holy Trinity, with love and respect. But then we work with them, and then with them being at the top, and then the mother and father, which is masculine and feminine sides, just to start beginning to see the fuller picture of what's sitting in their bodies, what's sitting in their blockages. So we work with sound, we work with breath, and we invite the guides and the element and the great spirit to be with us. And it's my also entering, in that plane of love, and coming in with my own voice as medicine and activation, my energy as the de-armorer, and to coming in with love and in love, so that they're able to rest in that as they come in, and they have no choice but to surrender, because it can be quite hard doing these sessions with someone you don't know sometimes. But when we set up the energy in a way that people understand, or maybe recognize, even if it's not consciously, then everything is taken care of. So that's essentially how I work with individuals, and even with bigger groups as well.
Yeah, it's in the energy that you bring. It's the energy that you emit, but also that you carry so deeply within your well. So I think that that's so beautiful, Vuyi, and I love how you approach your work, because it's done with such care. And how do you care for you? Because to care in this way, to be compassionate, to be loving, and to be open to the divine and the beloved in this way, there's also such a process of restoration that needs to take place for you to be that vessel. So how do you care for yourself? How do you show up for you?
I've learned to live in, with, by, through the breath, and my breath, chi, the divine, the air. So working with the breath has been very important, just for clarifying things, even when I'm in session with someone, is to always be mindful of this living angel that wants to sustain me and give me life and can energize me and resuscitate me. So that's a big one. And then, of course, the gift that was unraveled in my pain is the painting. And as I paint and I weave, and that for me is, it's like, it's like being in the sun, and how you might be not feeling so great. If you're in the sun long enough, you can feel yourself coming back to life. So painting has been that. And it took me a while to understand really how it energizes me, how it prays for me. Actually, I might be painting, but it feels like it's some sacred kind of circle that I enter into, and I'm given life through it. So painting is a big. Working with the elements is huge. So I take a lot of baths with salts and essential oils. I sing into the water, even the water that I interact with on a daily. I try to be alive and awake in my life, and I think that in itself sustains you every moment, whether it be the water or a sound, music that I might be listening to. When I acknowledge the magic lives as me in me, and so I'm sustained. I mean, it hasn't been an easy journey to learn that, but that's part of it. Sound is a huge one, so my singing bowls are very important to me, and all my other instruments, of course, and then acknowledging the allies that I do have, the plants, the plants in Zami, and um, I acknowledge they're not just plants that live in the house. They're co-conspirators, they're family members, they're elders, they're guides. So that also, having the awareness of how the role that they play in my life helps me when I, open my eyes and I see a plant. Or like, oh, okay, it's not just. So I try to have my healers and my healing tools be everything that I do. From even just dressing up sometimes in the day, the night dress that I might have is intentional so that I feel good in it. I feel like, oh, you are a wonderful, deserving being, and you are valuable and you're enough. So to have beauty and beauty, in all of nature is just magnificent and magical and beautiful. And I thought that as a healer, I have to kind of surrender that and be Popeye, whatever. But I realized that actually I'm like nature, and I can be a peacock if I want, or I can be a flamingo. So that has also restored me. Just valuing myself in the smallest thing. Yeah.
That's beautiful. The concept of allowing ourselves to be nature, because that's what we are, but also just playing with the different concepts of wearing different hats or trying on new things, and allowing each expression that wants to come through to be the magic that presents itself in that day, in that moment. And it's so great to hear that you do that for yourself, because it's a practice that I do too. I'd like almost imagine or sit with the meditation of, what am I today? Like, what thing in nature am I? And it's a fun thing to play with. It's a fun thing to sit with, because we are just the divine in drag. We're playing dress up, right? And we get to try on these different hats and see where it leads us. And I know that your creative process has been so much a part of that, right? Being able to give yourself the permission to do that for yourself has allowed you to then make more space for your creativity to come through with more clarity. So with expressing yourself, because I know it's been a journey, you've gone from being very sick, from wanting to take your own life, to creating content, to being a space holder, And in that process, you've had to reach milestones in your creative process. What have the steps done for you to then continue to push through the veil and to meet yourself on the other side? Can you kind of explain that process, what it's like to create and then to almost expose a new part of yourself, and what that looks like for you as a part of your own dance with the divine and your creative process?
Sure. Good question. I think that I realized that I wasn't living. That was a big thing. You know, we wake up and we do the things that we need to do, and sometimes we might even do the things we think we like to do. But I realized that, you know, as children, we would go and see the friend that we wanted to see, the one that we liked, not the one who's in our network, but we gave ourselves the things that fed us, that we felt poured into us somehow. And when I realized that I hadn't been living, I didn't really know anymore what my favorite film was. I didn't know what foods I liked. I didn't know. And then, of course, that all leads to I didn't know who I was. I think that kind of allowed me to start paying attention. Once I'd made that come to that understanding, I then began to understand that, oh, now I'm at a place where I want to know who I am. I want to know who I like. I want to discover what gives me life, what I will do even when no one's paying me. Something that I just want to wake up and do. I want to find what that thing is. And, you know, I went to photography. So I went to photography school. I've tried to find my thing. And once, of course, I was in this place that helped me to uncover my art, I then started to listen differently. And this was a listening to myself. And then the more that I show up for this thing, I'm actually going to take whatever little money I will make. I will buy a canvas or some paint or some rope. I'm going to try, despite what my mind might say, because, you know, maybe I was laughed at for doing certain things when I was younger. That's fine. I'm going to acknowledge that and put it down. But I'm going to go take this money, buy this thing, and do this thing. And I don't have to overthink it, because we've been conditioned to think things need to be commercialized and you need to sell it. How are you going to make money from it? I don't have to make myself. I don't have to exploit myself. This is simply me listening to myself, hearing myself, doing the opposite of what I did for a long time, which was forsaking myself. And so when this process of creativity is an unblocking, because all of it has been a process. You might have seen it, I don't know, but I have a TEDx talk that happened. I did. It happened so quickly, and I essentially was asked to fill in for some. And usually, TED speakers get 3 months and they get a coach, a speaking coach. I had to do everything, get everything prepared in 4 days. And because I had interrogated my own process, this journey of initiation, this journey of remembering and dying and awakening, the story was there, and then Spirit was like, okay, over here. But the interesting thing is that at that point, I was still pretty much blocked in the throat. And so it was a completely spiritual experience. Because of the experiences that I had growing up in a home where I grew up in the mouth of silence, I often say. I didn't really know how to be in relationship. I didn't know how to communicate. And then the traumas just made me kind of ashamed of who I was and unable to express myself freely and authentically. So even the person you see today is a very complete person, a different person to who I even was 2 years ago. But the creative process is a process of unblocking yourself, of unclogging yourself, of giving yourself spiritual CPR, or soulful CPR, but it's like it's this gradual thing that says, I'm at a shop and I see a plant. Oh, I may want a plant. I've never looked after a plant before, but okay, I'm going to get a plant because I deserve this plant. And then you start to allow yourself to deserve it, to receive it, to have. Then suddenly you realize you've got green fingers. But yeah, it's just it's a conjuring yourself to come back home, and it happens in the work. It spills over into into relationships, and most definitely the relationship with yourself. I think I've a question.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that response. I love because so much of it is just the process of coming back home to us. And I am so shocked that you only had 4 days to prepare for your beautiful TED Talk because you held yourself with such reverence. I know spirit and the divine was ever present in your conversation and the way that you communicated and held yourself. But wow, that is really powerful to speak in front of that many people and to convey with such clarity and conviction and to still be in the process of working through your throat chakra and the blockages that were there at that time. That must have been a portal in itself, right? To uncover these things that were just budding and waiting to come out and resurge within you.
It's such a teaching, a powerful teaching, because I mean, it just shows you how much of the false self and the mind stuff keeps us from allowing the higher self or the oversoul or the Godhead to move through us. And I think that's what I realized in that experience. I think in the first few more minutes of the talk, you can tell that neurotic Vuyi, who didn't really like herself and all of these things, was definitely present. And then the breath, I think that's also when I started learning that breath is really holds me. And then through the breath, eventually allowed, the authentic self to come through. And that was a place where my traumas and all of those stories didn't exist. So it was a huge, huge lesson, and also about when things are meant to be, they will be in the most miraculous way, and you won't know the how. So just keep dreaming. You won't know the how, but it'll happen. You will be able to carry it through, whether it's 3 months or 3 days, because it's divine timing. So that was really a big lesson in space.
That is so special. The breath has been such a teacher for me in my own experience. I had already been going through my own spiritual evolve. However, breath work is really what catapulted me into falling back in love with my creative flow and coming back to the return of the childlike wonder within. That was really the deep, deep uncovering was with the breath. And the breath is such a beautiful teacher. And I vividly recall you pausing on the stage in a moment of probably where you were, it's impossible to not have the head be somewhat involved, right? The mind wants to do what it wants to do. And it was a reclamation that you chose to pause and to take a breath, and you can see it. I can visualize that moment where you're on the stage and you just audibly take a deep, full breath. And what an invitation to start again, to choose again.
Yeah, and to give yourself permission, right? Which is something. I just loved what you said about the breath. I mean, I'm paraphrasing and shortening it, but the breath being this passageway, this tunnel back to the child, to the inner child. That was really powerful. I want to hear about that one day.
Yes, yes. I would love that. I would love to be in space with you, flesh in the flesh together at some point. Maybe that can happen in some time and space for us
Definitely.
to be together in company. Yeah, I would love that. I would really appreciate if you could share with
Yeah.
folks the work that you do so they can know what offerings you provide. So if they're interested in working with you and learning more
Mhm.
about your process and what that looks like, that they could potentially have the opportunity to learn from you.
Sure. So the first, I guess I'll start since we've just spoken about the talk. That talk opened up avenues to storytelling and speaking. We're understanding more and more just the power of voice and sound. And so I work as an inspirational speaker and storyteller, um, multidimensional and also multisensory. And so that's that's part of the services that I offer. And then, of course, it would be different in person, but I work with people from all over the world and work with leaders because I think we need more conscious leaders within our spaces, within workspaces, to make workspaces more humane, within leadership positions. So I work with leaders within organizations to help bring humanity and humility and spirit back into these spaces, and to also help to support them in understanding their teams better, knowing their teams and as individuals. And so that's part of it. I then also work. I have my program. Some of them are falling away just because I'm focusing more on group work, because true, deep, profound healing happens in community. But I do have a soul healing sessions, which is a 3-part series. You can do over 3 weeks or 3 months, where we work with that Holy Trinity and we work with the elements of fire, and we try and essentially help you become more present in your daily life, to hear your voice more, to learn how to use it again, and to resolve and dissolve the false patterns that are keeping you from magnetizing towards you the life that you truly want and desire and deserve. It is some of the pillars are from my own initiation and indigenous knowledge systems. And we work with the 4-part body system, which is the physical body, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies, to try and bring you back into harmony. And then with that, I work with reconnecting. So moving you away from the mind, because that's not natural, to bring the divinity back into you, so that your divinity can be the one that's the master of the mind, not the mind being master of you. And we do that by, reconnecting the mind with the heart, so the mind-heart coherence. And then further to that is then reconnecting the heart chamber, the heart wisdom, with the womb. So the womb heart coherence, which is the diaphragm coherence, the belly coherence, which is the seat of our subconscious intelligence. And then the one that I'm most excited about is a more intimate journey, which is soul song initiation. And it's an initiation of 5 months, where you have a direct kind of uh, access to me, and we work together in helping you resolve the deeper patterns within you. And there's 2 Zoom calls a month, or one, but it would be a longer session depending on how you prefer it. And I then also bring in more teachings on how to, resolve the brat within, working with posture, working with breath, all as a part of reclaiming or allowing your soul to sit in your body well again. And I also work with retreat centers and boutique hotels in offering spiritual offerings. So whether it be uh, sound experiences for their guests, or for individual guests or just offerings that they can have monthly or weekly for the space. And then I also am open to collaboration and customizing experiences for individuals, because people have different needs, but to intuit into what you might need and then developing something that is suitable for your organization. Yeah.
I think that those are incredible offerings. And I know that with your creative process, I'm sure new things will arise. And I would love to keep this community in the loop on what offerings are ever present for you in your work and as things ebb and flow with the divine. You are such a delight. I am so grateful to be connected with you. And I would also just love for you to provide just an offering of wisdom, a little bit of insight, if you will, for whatever feels relevant in the now, in your present experience, to share with the collective, to share with the community. What would your source of wisdom and insight be for folks?
Who you are in this very moment is enough. All of in this moment is acceptable, is worthy, is beautiful, is welcome. You can receive yourself in your entirety today, here and now, while still holding intentions to be a better person tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. Both can exist simultaneously. What you've been and what you've done, it's okay. What matters is how we resolve and how we learn from the things of our past, from the past versions of ourselves, and how those things can then liberate us into who we are now and who we dream ourselves and remember ourselves being, why we've come. You are probably doing far better than you think you are, and you always have. And it's time now for you to accept your beauty, your light, and that it's your time. It's safe now for you to be yourself. It's safe now for you to use your voice. It's safe now for you to give yourself permission to learn who you are, to dance your dance, to sing your song. You're the only person that can give yourself that permission. And you have the entire universe, the galaxies, and the omniverse rooting for you. Give yourself. That is what you become.
It's beautiful. And can you tell people where they can find you so they can follow your work and follow along with the journey that will continue to unfold for you?
Sure. I am on Instagram and Twitter, Vuyi Qubeka, and you can also catch me on vuyiqubeka.com. I have a secret garden, which is a YouTube channel, Vuyi Secret Garden, and you're welcome to come and share space there. I recently shared a sound journey, which I hope you'll enjoy, asking the winds to help us clarify and wash away what needs to be washed away. And yeah, that's where you can catch me.
Thank you, Vuyi. You are such a delight again. I'm so honored and privileged to share space with you. I learn from you each and every time we get to land and chat, and I'm just really grateful.
I also am very grateful. And at the very beginning of our effort, thank you for trying that we didn't give up. But I heard 3 But I would like to offer that if you'd like to just have a conversation once a season, that would be great. I just feel like there's reasons why we were having all those technical glitches, but I think there's energetically something of significance. But I would be honored to have a virtual tea. Maybe we can, for now, just say once a season. Yeah, so that we don't lose this connection.
I agree. I would love to have you on. I would love to continue to talk about whatever is ever present, because I think that and I think that we just have more to dive into together, but you sharing so much of your experience, I see so much of myself in you. So we have a lot more to play with and talk about, I think. So I think it would be really beautiful to do that. I look forward to the next season.
Sure, but I also mean it as just an individual, hey? Not just as a person. Like if you just wanted to have a virtual tea, that's what I meant. We can also. I'm happy to do podcast, but I would love to hear more about your story, because you keep saying there's so much that you relate to. But I would love to have a conversation with a woman where it's a breathing into each other, and it's us, kind of getting to know each other more. That's what I meant it, how I meant it. But I'm also happy to play more. Yeah. So we can just have conversations for now.
I would love that. I would love that.
Okay. Okay.
Both things. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely open for both. I definitely would be so honored to, let's first just woman to woman share tea with one another. That would be such a beautiful, beautiful space to hold with you.
Okay. Deal. Have a beautiful. No problem. Enjoy Japan.
Thank you, Vuyi. I appreciate you being so willing. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Yeah, thank you.
Hey there, it's Danae again. Just wanted to say thank you for sharing your time and energy with me. If this podcast resonates, please like, subscribe, follow, and share if you're willing. Reviews help too, so if you're feeling the vibe, please leave a review where you can. Sending all the love. Peace.